Hello and happy October. We are here and the leaves are turning. I don't know about where you are, but we've had some incredible days. I've been able to go out and walk and just enjoy the shift in season and colors and the essence that's in the air. And when I think of fall, it does, even though things aren't dying, they're moving through a cycle and falling asleep for the winter. Um, it does make me think of death and grieving at times, or at least ponder about that. And so I wanted to talk about that in a new way with you today, because I think that sometimes we focus on death as the death of a loved one who's crossed into the spirit world, or a severe ending. It can be traumatic. But when we think of it as a natural cycle that we experience many times, not just seasonally, but we experience grief in little mini micro elements of it periodically throughout our lives. And I think this is very relevant right now because it feels to me that there is a collective grief that's happening as well. Grief for people whose lives are being lost in wars, for people who are being discriminated against, um, for maybe a vision of the world that we thought would happen, and maybe it feels like we're not seeing that vision, or a love aspects of the world that we love that aren't that are changing. Then there's also the essence of a collective grief whenever there's a traumatic event or a natural disaster. I don't know if you feel it, but I breathe in that essence and I can feel the grief in the air. And I think there is a grief in the air right now that we're all experiencing. That's why I wanted to take a moment to just kind of talk to you about some of the things that I've done throughout my life to help me embrace grief with grace. And one of those things is that I do take time to savor the little mini deaths or griefs that's a part of my life. And one example that I can really relate to as we're moving through this discussion is when each of my children were in their senior year of high school. I created a photo album of their life, and especially with my first child, Sarah, but with both, I just knew what was happening the second time. But I cried and cried through the making of Sarah's album as I looked at my little baby, those little baby hands and feet all the way up into toddler, and all the memories coming up and into high school, and then imagining her going off. Now she's nearly 30 and living in LA, and I have this brilliant, wonderful new relationship with her as an adult child. But the essence of taking those moments to grieve, and I kind of did it throughout each of their phases of life, but to really have that moment to grieve all the aspects, all the different Sarahs or Justins that went through my life as I was a parent. And I think that when we do that in relationships, and we do that in dreams or hopes or any part of our life that is constantly changing, when we take time to reflect back on the beauty of it and allow grace to fill that space, then it allows us to have an open heart as we move forward, because then it moves into, grieving. I also had the experience with my parents who had Alzheimer's and dementia, that's called the long goodbye, that disease by some people. And it's true because you're grieving little increments of them throughout the process of their eventual death. I think this happens to us all in many different ways. And the more comfortable we get with the process and remembering that there is grace in grief, and that to me, it's about savoring. I can be crying really hard about grief that I'm experiencing, but my heart is open and filled with love, and I feel held during those moments. And it's not to say that I haven't also had despair moments, because I have, but filling this space with grace. And for me, that has a new meaning, because I recently, in the last few months, discovered a new frequency that I have no other name for but grace. But it's different than the thought of grace I've had before. It's this thick embrace that holds me, and the energy suspends me in this state of grace, I guess, in the way that you've maybe heard of people like in the middle of a car accident and they feel like there's a moment of grace or something in that. So that experience has really brought a new understanding to me as well. And so I wanted to share that with you. I have a couple things coming up along with everything else in this newsletter, but a couple things that really relate to this. So we have on October 11th, we have our one-day rejuvenation retreat at Delphi Falls, which is so healing and incredible. And that is going to include meditations that I lead. You just have to feel the energy, but I'll bring that frequency of grace in. And if you've had fractal illumination energy before, it'll weave into that. And then the next day, I will be speaking at Unity Church in Syracuse on Seneca Turnpike about the grace of grieving, or grieving with grace. And I think it's also online, so I'll try to get you that link so that you can see it in person as well. But after the service, I'm going to have a little workshop on this topic as well. So as you're reflecting back, you'll see through the newsletter the details of these things. But as you're thinking of this season and maybe taking a moment, if it's only stimulated by the leaves changing in that thought, if it's an abstract thought for you, or if you're tuned into something that you're feeling that you're letting go of, and taking a moment to feel the grace in the moment of letting go and grieving, experiencing that opening to the feeling of love, because it is that memory of love that creates the grief that we have. And when we realize that it's safe to open up and feel both emotions at the same time, then it's much easier for us to open our hearts up to love in every moment and not guard it from the fear of someday being hurt. So whether that's about the collective grief or a personal grief, this is a tool that you can use to really embrace life more vibrantly.